What's up, guys, and welcome back to None Other with your hosts, Talos. And of course, I'm flying solo here in this shorter review, similar to our review of Free Guys, where we just kind of free ball it. Free Guys, free ball it, yeah, get it? Okay, whatever, moving on. No Time to Die, James Bond. Kind of give like my own little opinion on it, and then we might throw it to another opinion of another host here in None Other, Peter. And then at the end, we're kind of finishing off to like, who could possibly replace Daniel Craig as the next 007 James Bond? Or could it be even a Jane Bond? I don't know, we'll see. If you guys are new to the channel, want to support us here in Another, consider giving a subscribe and a like down below. It always appreciate it. I don't know, my voice turned weird like that, but yes, consider good support and we always appreciate it. But yes, back into No Time to Die. This is actually the final movie for Daniel Craig. Now, from what I understood, I think he's been playing James Bond for about close to 15 years. So let me see. So yes, his first movie here is back in 2006, Casino Royale. So 2006, wow. Yeah, 15 years. So I was right, yeah. So 15 years of doing James Bond. I think he's been the longest version of James Bond. So obviously the previous James Bond was Pierce Brosnan, and I think he only did it for about 7 years, roughly, I think it was. But this being his final movie here. But let's talk about No Time to Die real quick. Obviously, we will be talking about spoilers, so keep that in mind. If you haven't seen the movie, definitely check it out. For a quick rundown, it was a nice little closure of Daniel Craig. Kind of mixed feelings of how it ended. But one thing I will say, the way it was ended is the first time it's ever been ended that way, without spoiling it, I guess, in the past 64 years. According to an article that I saw, that this is the first time this ever happened to a James Bond character in like 64 years of this version of James Bond, to include the books as well, I think. That's all I can say without spoiling the movie. But obviously, great action sequences here. There's about, I want to say, 6 different like pieces of like action, but we'll talk about that of course in the review. I definitely recommend, especially if you're a James Bond fan. There is one con that I will say that's not spoilery, is the fact that they had this one amazing car, the Aston Martin Valhalla. Now they had it as like a background piece. They even had some YouTubers reviewing this car for the upcoming James Bond movie back in 2020, and it was never driven at all. It was just kind of like a back piece to it. And I was like, wow, for an amazing car like that, they would at least like had it driving out of a driveway at least. But no, it was like kind of stuck there as a backdrop. But what I will say when we talk about cars is they feature a lot of cool stuff in here. Like they had a DBS Superleggera. They had the old like DB5, like the classic DB5 on here. I want to say this is one of the first movies that had multiple versions of Aston Martins on here. And of course, if you guys don't know, Aston Martin is the car of James Bond. There's pros and cons to that, but the fact that they didn't drive the Valhalla makes me a little upset. Rant over, I guess. Let's move on to some spoiler discussions. So you've been warned. Go watch the movie if you enjoyed it. And it's a nice little conclusion to, I guess, the Daniel Craig version of James Bond. When the movie first starts out, you see kind of a younger version of Madeline. Essentially, as a kid, you get introduced to this villain here, I'm probably gonna butcher this name, by the way, but Yustafer Savin, I think that's how you pronounce it. But basically, he was looking to essentially kill the father here, Mr. White. Instead, the mother was killed, and Madeline tries to run away and gets trapped in under the ice as she was running away. She would end up being saved by this character. But this kind of more like a backstory of this whole thing. So after this dream sequence, it kind of it jumps back to like, I guess, the present. So they're in like southern Italy here. So during the sequence, James was trying to move on from his previous lover, Vesper. And we assume that it's going to be with Madeline. So there's a little promise that, oh yeah, I'll be with you, blah, blah, but you need to move on from Vesper. So he goes to visit her grave here, but things go crazy right off the bat. You pretty much see this already during the one of the initial trailers. In a car, basically the car was getting shot at multiple times, And obviously it was targeting Madeline here. And at this current point, James does not trust Madeline. During this entire time, like, James Bond didn't believe essentially this one shooter was targeting her like nonstop. Like, basically it was like a bulletproof car, but eventually it was gonna break the glass. And then so one of the coolest sequences here is probably one of the best sequences, I think. The headlights flipped out, and then these machine guns came out of the headlights, and then he did a donut around and was shooting up the targets here. That was probably one of the coolest like sequences here of the entire movie. But of course, because of what happened here, James does not trust her and just like threw off her into the train, and basically says that, yeah, this is the last that we'll ever meet. But of course, we will see her again later in the movie to, I guess, explain more of this backstory. I noticed this right in the beginning of the sequence where she was kind of holding her stomach out on the train. And like, obviously she's not hungry, she's pregnant, but we don't know that right off the bat. But that was one of the cute things that I've noticed when I was watching the movie. I was like, oh, the fact that she's kind of holding her stomach made me think like she might actually be holding or bearing something. It jumps 5 years later. James pretty much all by himself, like catching fish, and he's like not trusting of anybody. At this point, 007 is retired, so they even retired the number, which we'll talk about more later. Now, the one thing I will say about this whole interaction with them inside the club, there's this other character there, Logan Ash, who just smiles a lot. There's a little bit of a funny little sequence there with James saying, "Oh, why are you with him? He's weird. He smiles a lot." Like at that point of time, like even as a viewer, like it was almost obvious that something was going to happen between his character Logan Ash, but we'll get into that a little bit. Essentially, the reason why they're kind of all jumping in to this mission, to include even the M16 folks, to include a new female character, which were introduced as the quote-unquote new 007. Naomi is her name, I believe. Later on, she will actually retire the number back to him. The whole reason for this mission is this almost like biogenetic nanobot virus that could be spread through, I guess, people's DNAs. And it's like so specific that you can just name each individual person, and like it's going to kill off that specific target no matter what. Now, what's interesting about this is like, it's like the doctor was actually trying to kill off the specters, like all of the specters across the world. And so there was a whole the massive database of like specters. But of course, the evil person comes into play. So obviously Savin is the big villain here. And with this, I guess, nanobot type virus. But there's a CIA agent here assisting Bond, known as Paloma, I think that's how you pronounce it. And I really wish she came back, like, but she was very, very attractive. Like, she was probably the most attractive person that in the movie, I think, in my personal opinion. But yeah, she never came back. But I guess she had like 3 weeks of training, and she jumped right into a mission with James Bond. And like, there's a nice little chemistry between her and Bond, especially during the fight sequences in that little area. But before it even gets there, I guess the scientist that was like, I guess he really wanted to kill off the specters. They were like going to do like a demonstration here. So, but instead of actually killing off the people in that little party area, it killed off the specters instead, because of he kind of swapped the DNA samples of the specters. So basically, anybody who's like a specter or a part of that database was killed off. And it was incredible sequence. Like people are like essentially James Bond, of course. It didn't affect him because he wasn't part of that DNA sequence, but it still got into a system, which comes into play later on. But I really wish she would come back though. Like almost feels like our character was wasted, I think.
When you're ready.
You're late.
Salute.
You know, a fun character to have, because I think all the other characters didn't have, it didn't resonate much to me. Like Felix resonated, yes, but unfortunately they killed him off when they were chasing over the double agent. And this is when we find out who the double agent is eventually. And of course that would be Logan Ash. Felix here was injured, so he wasn't able to like kind of help him out. And of course James, being their best buds to be, would try to save him, but of course he ended up like leaving him there to drown, unfortunately. The one thing I will say, like with the whole Felix death thing, like I don't know if it was just done too quickly, or like from my understanding, I think the last time he saw Felix was like maybe 2 movies ago, because he wasn't in Skyfall, I think, at all. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but like he wasn't there for like almost 2 movies. We're just given the like idea that these guys been friends for a very, very long time, and we're supposed to care that he died, but I wasn't getting that impact. It could have been done better, I guess you can say. After this whole sequence happened, and he basically went back to project integrate the previous, one of the previous, I guess you can say, enemies. Ernest Sarvo Blofeld, I think is how you pronounce it. He was in prison and whatnot, and apparently there's only one person that he wants to speak to, and of course that is Madeline. You guys remember Madeline from the very beginning? 5 years later, they end up meeting back up again here, and of course Madeline didn't want to see anything with this Blofeld person. What's interesting about this part is I believe she knew that James Bond had that like nanobot virus in him, because as soon as you touch anybody who's a Spectre or anybody who has a DNA in that trace, it's going to be infected like almost instantaneously. It's one of those like bioweapons. So the last person who could have gave some like leads or clues, he killed. Obviously that same cabin that we were introduced to in the very beginning, that is where Madeline fled to. The only person that knew about this was James. Apparently she has a child, as I mentioned earlier, and she tried to lie that it's not James's child. But there was a little sequence during like I think a breakfast table, and the eyes of the child is exactly the same color eyes as James. So I was like, it's pretty obvious it's James. But I'm going to talk about the forest scene real quick. Obviously they're running away at this point, and this is when we see Logan Ash again. And like because he was such a terrible villain, I didn't really care that he died at this point, but it was nice how he died, I guess. Essentially he was trapped between like a rock and hard place, and the truck was kind of leaning off and was being held by something. I want to say it was like a stick or something that James had, and essentially was like, I forgot exactly what he said before he killed them off, but he basically pulled that little stick or rock, and that's when the entire truck just fell on him. So I thought that was a pretty cool sequence, but at the same time he wasn't that big of a villain. So we finally get a clue here where Savit went, and obviously he has a very like lair, like in the middle of nowhere. This is pretty much their factory where they essentially were like building this virus. So Safin here made an interesting thing. Obviously he went ahead and kidnapped both Madeline and the daughter at this point. The diabolical thing is that he had like a DNA sample of essentially her, almost like a backup plan. So if everything fails, he was gonna crack that, essentially poison James at the very end. Obviously, you know, James is gonna win. He's gonna try to he basically stopped all the plans. The plan was essentially for a couple of I want to say it was Navy, maybe Air Force. They were going to launch some missiles and pretty much destroy the entire plant from ever, I don't know, yeah, being exposed and whatnot. So he went back and saw the doll that daughter was holding, because the entire time the daughter was looking for the doll. It's like, oh, I'm missing my doll. I'm missing my doll. But yes, this is the final sequence. Obviously, he lured him into this. They kind of explained a little bit in the movie already. Basically, this like garden. If you're exposed to certain things, or you touch certain things, it can expose you to like various the nanobot virus. They had a little fight sequence, and I don't think even Savin here wanted him to be dead. He essentially shot him. They shot each other, and he fell to the ground. And that little vial that he had holding in his hand, he crushed it with his hands, and the vial of blood, which is Madeline's blood, fell into the water that James was in. So which means if there was ever a point where James ever touched Madeline or the daughter, they will essentially die. So there is no way to like have a happy ending for James at this point. Missiles were on the way, by the way, so he had like less than a minute left to evacuate, and Q was in the phone. It's like, you need to leave right now. And then, but at that point he knew that he was contaminated by this nanobot virus. Yeah, and the missiles came, and this was the first time in like 64 years, I believe it was, that James Bond actually died in a movie. Now I want to say there was other movies where he faked his death, but he never really died, I think. But this is the first time he actually legit died. You see the missiles actually landing, and it was kind of like a touching moment. Essentially concluding Daniel Craig here. Nice toast at the end. Pretty much, remembering all of Bond's missions and all his friends like Q, the new 00, which we never knew what our new 00 number was. Moneypenny was there. So they were just giving a toast to essentially the legacy that is James Bond. That's pretty much how it concludes. There's no like ending, like, to like say that James Bond will return. It tried to be impactful. I don't know, because it felt kind of rushed in some sequences. I didn't really feel that it did a very good job at it. I still enjoyed it. It was almost like a slightly above average movie for me. One of the biggest complaints that I have is, for some reason, they split off Naomi character and James Bond at one sequence, and I didn't see the need for that. And by the time they did finally unite, because they were kind of bickering each other because of the whole 007 thing, but there was one point where they finally reunited when they were driving in the DBS Superleggera. There was no chemistry there. I felt like she was kind of a wasted character. There's nothing that made her likable in the movie. If they were trying to make her the next James Bond or Jane Bond, whatever, I wasn't getting it at that point. And then the whole scene with James Bond sacrificing himself. But I didn't really tear up though. Like, I feel like that should have been the moment where you would tear up. If a movie is done well enough, I would tear up. I would admit that I would actually cry if I felt that impact. But I wasn't getting that in this movie. I'm not saying it was a bad movie, but I'm just gonna give it an average. If I was to give this a rating right now, I'll probably give it like a 6 out of 10. I feel like this is kind of a movie where you would just watch either on Netflix or HBO Max type deal versus in the theaters. But if you want that big theater experience, that's definitely on you. But apart from those small little sequences, that's pretty much what I enjoyed for the movie. So we have one person from Noneother that wants to kind of show his opinion on the movie as well. I'm gonna throw it off to you, Peter. What are your thoughts?
Hey there, everyone. I might have changed a bit since you last saw me. I did some IRL rebranding in honor of my favorite channel, Noneother, obviously. No Time to Die. This felt like a movie that was doomed for infamy right off the bat. First of all, Spectre was not critically well received, and then this movie went into development in 2016, and it went through like 10 directors. At one point, Denis Villeneuve was meant to direct it, known for Arrival, Blade Runner 49, and Dune, most recently. That would have been a weird Bond movie if they stuck with that. Cary Fukunaga stepped into the director's chair to finally finish this movie. And then he said some weird things in interviews. He claimed he was going to bring James Bond into the Me Too generation. What does that mean? And then, of course, news broke that Lashana Lynch was going to be playing the new 007 in this movie, which I think a lot of people were justifiably kind of worried about. An interview with The Guardian, she says her character might have struggled with her weight in the past, or be having problems with a boyfriend, or be on her period. I thought there might be a scene where she's coming out of the toilet and you see her throw her tampon in the bin. Or in the ladies' room, you're going to see someone pick their nose or pull out their wedgie. This is a James Bond movie. A lot of people, myself included, were kind of worried because it really felt like this film was in the hands of a bunch of people who didn't like James Bond, who didn't like this franchise. It's like they saw it almost as a burden. They had to fix the character. On top of that, supposedly this film had been in development and been marketed for so long that they would need to make $900 million just to break even. James Bond as well is such a marketable franchise. You might remember that scene in Skyfall where he shaves with like an old school straight razor. After that movie came out, straight razor sales in the UK exploded like 400% or something. So this character has like a profound effect on the things people want to buy. And long before the movie came out, you could find, breakdowns of everything he wears in every scene in the movie, because they want you to buy all the clothes. This is why you need to like, comment, and subscribe, and buy the merch and all that, so that we can afford James Bond t-shirts. Our fellow Noneother host, Chris Ora, he was saying, and some shots in the film, Bond's watch is actually blurred out, probably because a brand deal fell through. But anyway, after all the delays, all the infamy, it's finally out, and I thought it was pretty good. For the most part. Personally, I'd say this is the best one since Casino Royale. So if you're a fan of Craig Bond, I think it's a worthy successor and end to this kind of mini arc. If you're more a fan of the old ones, you might think it's kind of too Hollywood, too kind of nice and clean. It's not as fun. It's like it's very serious. It's not as fun as the older movies. Oh yeah, and all that Lashana Lynch stuff, the bathroom wedgie thing, nothing like that. Nothing like that is in the film, unless my brain, blocked that bit out. I don't know what she was talking about. Performance-wise, I thought Daniel Craig was, well, you know what to expect from him, but it felt like he really believed in what this film was trying to do here. He was really kind of going all out for this send-off. Rami Malek as the arch-villain Safin, I thought was not great. He doesn't get that much screen time. He's not very memorable, and even just the character itself, it's a very generic Bond character. For a movie with so much kind of finality to it, that he doesn't feel like a very final villain. He feels like an afterthought. Now we'll give some kind of broader thoughts that will be a little bit kind of spoilery. So talking about Safin, the villain, like I already said, to me, he felt a very generic cookie cutter kind of Bond villain, and he never seems that evil or that threatening. So he's in the opening scene here, where he's already kind of walking around with a limp, and he's on like a little revenge quest. And then he shows up again so half the movie is spent without this guy in it. Then when he shows up again, it's meant to be like a twist reveal, but of course all the marketing already spoiled that. We knew he was the villain. We knew that was him in the opening scene, if you've seen any of the marketing, even just the posters. And to me in particular, he felt like a rethread of the Skyfall villain played by Javier Bardem. Is that how you pronounce it? Who was much more iconic, much more threatening, and he felt like a much more personal villain to Bond, whereas Safin feels very incidental, like he just happens to be there. But even then, it's like it was a revenge thing. And then there's Lashana Lynch again, who has really quite a minor role on the whole. Even though she's 007, I expect her to upstage Bond every step of the way and be this kind of obnoxiously politically correct character. That's not really how it is. No, she fails to upstage Bond, and she's kind of a rival character to him for most of the movie, and over time they become friends. I found it kind of a waste of time. It doesn't feel very earned or organic when they do become friends, and mostly she's just kind of an annoyance. I can't really fault the actress. I think it's more how this character was written and the role she was kind of forced to have. I think it was fundamentally misguided. Oh, and then we have Ana de Armas, who you might know from Blade Runner 2049. She was fantastic. She was the best character. And I guess this based on the marketing, because she was always wearing the one outfit in the trailers and the posters. But she only has one sequence in the movie. She pops in, she does a mission, she leaves, and we don't see her again, which is such a shame. Because even in that brief visit, she's like a breath of fresh air. She's cool, she's competent, but she doesn't upstage Bond. She's funny. I think she has better chemistry with Bond than any of the other characters in the movie. If they're gonna do like a spin-off film or whatever, I would much rather see this character return than Lashana Lynch's character. Because imagine if that character had been the new 007. And even in this brief sequence, she's probably the most entertaining character in the film. This movie's a very serious one. There's no real jokes, there's no real levity, except for Ana de Armas and when Q shows up later on a little bit. Oh, and we also have David Dencik, or it might be David Dencik, who plays this Russian scientist, and he plays this really fun, not even double-crossing, like quadruple-crossing character. Like he betrays the British government to go to Spectre, and then he betrays Spectre to go to Bond and the CIA, and then he betrays them to go to Safin. Honestly, I think he was a better villain than Safin. He was more fun. Oh, and he's also victim to the cringiest line in the movie. Lashana Lynch says, "Hey, do you know what time it is? Time to die," and like kicks him into a vat of the virus or whatever. There's also Billy Manusen, who plays this rookie CIA agent who turns out to be another double agent. And I thought he was a way better villain than Safin as well, because he kills Felix, who's been a friend of Bond ever since Casino Royale. And the fact it was a betrayal, he felt like a much more personal villain to Bond than Safin ever does, and yet he gets kind of dealt with in the most whatever way, and they just move on from it. Why'd the lighting change? So this, I guess, takes us to the two kind of big spoilers about this. Number one, it turns out Bond has a child in this one. And two, it turns out he does have time to die. So Dad Bond, I thought, was really kind of a genius choice, because that's something that's unexplored territory for this character. After 24 movies, this is one way they can genuinely bring it somewhere new while not, ruining the character. And I really loved as well how much Bond changes after he realizes this. He becomes very self-sacrificial. He becomes very kind of unselfish. It's like a profound flip, and I kind of just wish, because this only comes in at the very end, I kind of wish that was more of the movie and we had more of him dealing with this new role and kind of adjusting to it, because that would have been a genuinely totally new thing for this series if it was kind of more focused on that. And imagine if, as I already suggested, imagine if Ana de Armas was 007 and he has this kind of flirtatious relationship with her, like he's trying to seduce her, and then he's like, oh, I have to go pick up my kid. It would be so bizarre but funny for James Bond to go that way. But of course, he's only Dad Bond for like 20 minutes before he blows up. So he kind of gets to dodge, any real character development, I would say. Although what we do see is quite nice. Although I might be wrong here. Is there any actual urgency to that scene? Because I felt like he could have just chilled on this island, indefinitely. They didn't have to blow it up ASAP, unless I missed something there or I've just forgotten. He's not super threatening, he's not super personal to Bond. He doesn't come up with anything, like any clever way where, oh, Bond finally can't get out of this one. The whole thing is kind of like, whoop, there we go. Oh yeah, and as Talos probably already told you, the selection of cars in this movie is, peak as always. One I liked in particular, there's an Aston Martin Vantage in it, which is Timothy Dalton's Bond car, which was a good reference, to one of the kind of less appreciated Bond actors. Oh yeah, and I have to bring up Metal Gear Solid. So there's this quaint little game called Metal Gear Solid about a spy, secret agent type guy who comes out of retirement. He's sent to deal with some bad guys. It turns out he's been infected with a nanomachine virus that targets specific genetics, which, wipes out the bad guy team one by one. There's also weirdly specific scenes. Like there's a bit toward the end of No Time to Die where he's going upward around this spiral staircase, shooting guys as he goes up, and the guys keep coming. That's an exact scene from Metal Gear Solid 1. Definitely makes you think. And there's actually a Metal Gear Solid movie coming out, so I wonder how much this might colour perception of that people might mistake the MGS movie as a rip-off of this because of those similarities, even though I think MGS does a way better job properly exploring its themes and so on. So in conclusion, there's definitely some issues I have with this film. There's a lot of things I would do differently, and kind of on an emotional level, with the big emotional finale and all, it kind of failed to really grip me. But I enjoyed parts of it very much, and even where it missed, I kind of, for the most part, appreciated what it was trying to do. On the whole, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It's closer to a 6 than an 8.
Obviously, this is the end of the movie, so let's go finish off and just talk about this article that I found here. Potentially the next 17 actors who could replace Daniel Craig. The big top 3, I think, here is Tom Hardy, Henry Cavill or Cavill, and Idris Elba. Those are the top 3 that people are saying that potentially could be the next James Bond. There's a few pros and cons with this. Obviously, the whole James Bond movies are very, very iconic, and they typically have long contracts, which means they typically don't want people that's already in a big commitment. And I feel like Tom Hardy, even Idris Elba, seems like he's kind of in a committed series here, but maybe not. I don't know. But obviously, Tom Hardy being the Venom here, which by the way, we will be doing a review on Venom 2, so definitely stay tuned for that. It could be multiple commitments, I guess. It just kind of depends on how heavily the recording sessions are for the movies, but he definitely looks the part though. And then if we go to Idris Elba, he's kind of in Suicide Squad, but at the same time, it doesn't mean he's going to be in multiple other Suicide Squad movies. They can always pick other people for that. But I just feel like they're not going to pick those two because they have prior commitments. But I could be wrong. I don't know. But the one person that I feel like will definitely probably get it is Henry Cavill. He is Superman, but there's no confirmation that he's going to be Superman still. People want him to be Superman still. And he's also in the Witcher series as well for Netflix. So he also has a lot of projects going on as well. but I just feel like he has the look. He has the look of James Bond, like a younger James Bond. Now it kind of depends what direction they want to go for the next James Bond, like I guess, legacy and series. Like if they want to go more of a younger looking James Bond or more an older looking James Bond. But I'm okay with Henry Cavill being the James Bond here because he just has the look. But I don't know, that's just my personal opinion on that. But I'm going to throw in another name here real quick. Someone who might fit that age group, and that's Johnny Depp. Like, yes, he's typically, you know, very, I guess, hairy, like around the face. So he probably needs to kind of trim it down a little bit. But if he does like, even if he has like a goatee or kind of like you know, trimmed out, I think Johnny Depp could be a potentially good James Bond as well, and I think he fits around that age group as well. But it just kind of depends what direction you want to go for, and that's just the male counterparts. It doesn't even mean this could actually mean that we might get like a female James Bond as well, or a female Jane Bond, if you want to call it. In this particular article, they only mentioned one, which is that the previous 007 character, Naomi, that was featured in No Time to Die. It could actually be a direct spin-off. It doesn't even have to be like a actual sequel, like a James Bond character. It could be just a spin-off of James Bond and her being that portrayal. Another name here that I'm familiar with is Henry Golding. He played in Snake Eyes, Crazy Rich Asians. He could be the first Asian James Bond, so I'm a supporter of that, of course. Obviously, in the comments, leave in the comments down below who you guys feel could be a better or a good potential James or Jane Bond. 007. It's all just a number, right? It's only just a number, as James Bond said in the movie. But that's essentially my review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. If you guys did enjoy it, definitely press a like and subscribe for more future content here in Noneother. But that's all I got. So until next time, ciao. There, guys.